She was sleeping in a barn next to the horses, until a cowboy said, "You belong in my house." Maria had been walking for hours, maybe even days. She had no clear direction, no map, and certainly no plan. The sun had long disappeared behind the distant hills, leaving only the cold night air and the quiet sounds of nature around her. Her shoes were worn through, the soles flapping slightly with every step, and her clothes were torn in places from the rough bushes and fences she had passed along the way. Each step felt heavier than the last, and yet she kept moving. She didn't have a choice. If she stopped, the cold would catch her, and the loneliness would feel even heavier. She had learned long ago that stopping was dangerous, even for just a moment. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she had eaten nothing since early that morning. The small snack she had found in an abandoned gas station hours ago had barely filled the emptiness inside her. Hunger gnawed at her like a persistent animal, and she pressed her hand against her stomach, trying to ignore it. She had learned that complaining about hunger didn't help. Surviving did. Every person she had met along the way had given her a different look. Some pity, some judgment, and a few outright hostility. But Maria had grown used to those looks. She had learned that people rarely understood someone like her. Someone who had nothing, who had lost everything, and yet kept moving forward step by step without knowing where the next step would lead. As she walked along a narrow dirt path, the shadows of trees stretched across her path, flickering in the weak light of the stars above. The air smelled of damp earth and dry leaves, a mixture that reminded her of childhood memories she barely wanted to think about. She remembered a small town she had grown up in, where the streets had been clean and the people polite, where she had felt safe and warm. But those days were gone. She had been forced out, left with nothing but the clothes on her back and the small hope that somewhere ahead there was a place she could belong. A place where she wouldn't be chased away or forgotten. Hours passed, and her legs began to ache. Her knees ached, her back protested every movement, and her feet felt like they were carrying stones instead of her body. She looked around, hoping to see even a hint of shelter, a roof or a wall that could protect her from the cold night. That's when she saw it, a barn in the distance, its silhouette dark against the faint glow of the moon. It was an old building, probably not used much, but it looked sturdy. The roof seemed intact, and the walls were tall enough to block the wind. She hesitated for a moment, remembering all the warnings she had learned on the road. Strangers' property was dangerous. Old barns could be unstable, and sleeping outside could get her in trouble. But the cold was sharper than fear, and the hunger was heavier than caution. She had no choice. With a deep breath, she approached the barn, her footsteps soft against the dirt. The wooden doors were old and creaked loudly when she pushed them open. Inside, the smell of hay and horses hit her immediately. It was strong and earthy, but it carried warmth. She could hear soft snorts and the shuffle of hooves on the floor. A few horses looked up at her with gentle eyes, their breath fogging in the cold air. Maria froze for a moment, unsure if she was welcome. But as she stepped further in, the horses didn't react aggressively. They simply watched her, curious but calm. It was the first sign of kindness she had seen in days. Maria found a small pile of hay in a corner and sank into it, curling up as tightly as she could. The hay was scratchy, but it was warm and soft enough to block some of the cold from the wooden floor. She closed her eyes for a moment, listening to the sounds around her. The low hum of the wind through the cracks in the barn, the occasional shuffle of a horse, and the faint creak of the wooden roof. It was quiet, safer than the streets she had been walking. She allowed herself to breathe, taking in the warmth that the barn offered. For the first time in days, she didn't feel completely alone. As night deepened, Maria's thoughts wandered. She thought about how she had ended up here, sleeping in a barn next to horses. She remembered her family, the arguments, the misunderstandings, and the harsh words that had forced her out. She thought about the people she had met on the road, the man who had refused to give her water, the woman who had sneered at her worn clothes, the young boy who had shared a piece of bread with her before running away in fear. Life had not been easy, and she knew it wouldn't get easier without help. But she also knew that stopping and giving up wasn't an option. She had survived this far. She could survive more. The horses seemed to sense her thoughts, and one of them slowly walked over to her corner, sniffing the hay near her. Maria watched it, amazed at how calm it was. She reached out a trembling hand and gently stroked its nose. The horse nuzzled her hand lightly, and she smiled for the first time in a long while. It was a small act, a small sign of connection, but it meant the world to her. In that moment, she felt a tiny spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, not everything in the world was against her. Maybe there were places, people, or even animals that could offer kindness without expecting anything in return. As she lay there in the hay, Maria's mind wandered to the future. She didn't know what it would hold, whether the next day would bring danger or opportunity, kindness or cruelty, but she knew one thing: she was alive, and she had a place to rest for the night. That was enough, for now. The wind outside howled softly, rattling the wooden doors, but inside the barn she felt a small warmth that spread through her tired body. It was not much, but it was a start. Hours passed slowly, and Maria drifted in and out of sleep. Every sound seemed louder in the quiet of the barn: the rustle of the hay, the snort of a horse, the creak of the old roof beams. Each sound reminded her that she was not completely alone. She was surrounded by life, by creatures that existed without judgment, without expectation, and for Maria, that was a comfort she hadn't felt in a long time. Before she fell into a deep sleep, she made a silent promise to herself. She would not give up. She would survive. She would find a way to belong somewhere. Even if it wasn't in a house or a town, even if it was just in the warmth of a barn, she would continue. She would not let the world break her spirit. Not yet. And with that promise, she finally let her body relax, sinking into the soft hay, surrounded by the quiet breathing of the horses. And for the first time in a long time, Maria felt a small, fragile sense of peace. The night stretched on, long and cold, but Maria remained safe. The barn protected her from the worst of the wind. The horses provided quiet company, and the straw offered warmth. She dreamed, faintly, of a better life, not just surviving, but living. She dreamed of laughter, of kindness, of someone seeing her, not as a burden, but as a person with a story, with value. And though the night was dark, the tiniest spark of hope burned within her, a light she could hold on to until morning. As the first hint of dawn approached, Maria stirred slightly, opening her eyes to the soft gray light that filtered through the cracks in the barn walls. She looked around at the horses, still calm and gentle, and felt a sense of gratitude she hadn't felt in a long time. She had made it through the night. She was still here. And perhaps, just perhaps, this barn, these horses, and the quiet of the morning were the beginning of something better. The morning sun was just beginning to rise when Maria woke, her body stiff from sleeping in the hay. She stretched slowly, feeling the soreness in her back and legs, but also a strange comfort from the safety of the barn. The horses had moved quietly during the night, but now they were awake, nuzzling their hay and stretching their legs. Maria watched them for a moment, amazed at how calm and gentle they seemed, despite their size. There was a peace in their presence that she hadn't felt anywhere else for a long time. She stood up carefully and brushed some hay off her clothes. The barn was quiet except for the soft sounds of the horses and the faint chirping of birds outside. Maria considered her next move. She had no money, no family to return to, and no real plan for the day. All she had was the barn, the horses, and the small hope that maybe someone in this town might help her. She had learned, though, that asking for help was risky. People often looked down on someone who had nothing, who had clearly fallen on hard times. But hunger and fatigue made her bold in a way she hadn't felt before. She decided to stay close to the barn for now. As she was sweeping a small corner of the barn to make a more comfortable place to sit, she heard the sound of hooves approaching from the outside. Her heart jumped, and she froze. She wasn't sure if it was a person coming or just another horse from the nearby pastures. A tall figure appeared in the doorway, silhouetted against the brightening sky. Maria instinctively pressed herself into the corner, hoping not to be seen. The figure stepped closer, revealing a cowboy wearing worn jeans, boots covered in dust, and a hat that shaded his face from the sun. The cowboy stopped a few feet away from her and looked around the barn, his eyes scanning the horses and the small piles of hay. "Hello!" he called gently. His voice was calm and steady, without any hint of anger. Maria hesitated, unsure if she should answer. She had learned to hide, to avoid strangers, and yet something in the tone of his voice made her feel safe. Slowly, she stepped out of the corner and raised her hand slightly, showing that she meant no harm. The cowboy smiled a small, kind smile that made Maria's heart beat a little faster. "Don't worry," he said. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just wanted to see if you were okay." "You've been sleeping here for a while, haven't you?" Maria nodded, her throat tight. She wanted to explain everything. The journey, the hunger, the loneliness, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she whispered, I have nowhere else to go." The cowboy's eyes softened. He took a careful step closer, keeping a respectful distance. "Wow," he said. "You shouldn't be out here alone. It's not safe, especially for someone like you." Maria looked at him, unsure what to say. She had been living alone for so long that the idea of someone genuinely caring about her safety felt strange. The cowboy tilted his head slightly, as if sensing her hesitation. "My name's Jake," he said. "I own this ranch. If you want, I can bring you some food and water." Maria's stomach tightened. She hadn't had a proper meal in days, and the thought of warm food made her mouth water. But pride and fear kept her from immediately accepting his offer. I can't stay," she said softly. "I'll just move on when I need to." Jake nodded, understanding. He wasn't angry, and he didn't push. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small packet of dried fruit. "Here," he said, handing it to her. "It's not much, but it's better than nothing." Maria accepted it with trembling hands, her eyes watering from gratitude. She ate slowly, savoring every bite, feeling the warmth of nourishment spreading through her tired body. Jake leaned against the doorway, watching her quietly. Maria noticed that he wasn't judging her, wasn't asking her questions she didn't want to answer. He simply existed there, a calm presence in a world that had often been harsh and unkind. It was a strange feeling, to be seen without fear, suspicion, or pity. She didn't realize it, but she was beginning to trust him. After she finished the snack, Maria looked up at Jake and finally asked the question that had been on her mind. "Why are you helping me? You don't even know me." Jake shrugged lightly, as if it were the simplest thing in the world. "Because everyone deserves a chance," he said. "Sometimes life is hard, and sometimes people need a little help." "You don't have to explain yourself to me. You're safe here, and that's what matters." Maria felt a lump in her throat. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. Most people only saw her as trouble or weakness. But Jake, he seemed to see something else. Something worth protecting. Over the next few days, Jake returned to the barn, bringing food, water, and small items he thought might help Maria. "A blanket here, a few apples there, even a small bucket of oats for the horses." Each gesture, simple as it was, made her feel a little more human, a little less invisible. She started talking to him in short sentences at first, hesitant to share too much but gradually opening up about her journey. She told him about the roads she had walked, the towns she had passed through, and the nights she had spent sleeping under the stars. Jake listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally and sometimes offering advice or encouragement. Maria also began learning about the horses. Jake taught her their names, how to feed them, how to clean their hooves, and how to calm them when they were restless. At first she was clumsy and unsure, but the horses seemed to respond to her gentle touch, and slowly she gained confidence. She discovered that caring for the animals gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in a long time. Each day she felt a little stronger, a little more capable, and a little more hopeful. One evening, as the sun was setting and painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Jake sat beside her on a bale of hay. "You know," he said quietly, "you don't have to do this alone anymore. You've been surviving for a long time, but surviving isn't living. You deserve more than just a barn and a corner of hay." Maria looked down, unsure how to respond. The words were kind, but they also made her heart ache. She had been alone for so long that the idea of being offered a place in someone else's life felt both wonderful and frightening. Jake continued, his voice gentle. I can't promise the world, but I can promise you a safe place. A roof over your head, food in your belly, and people who care. You don't have to worry about being alone anymore. Maria swallowed hard, feeling tears prick her eyes. The weight of the last weeks, the fear, the hunger, the loneliness pressed down on her, and for the first time she allowed herself to hope. She looked at Jake and asked softly, Why me? Why do you care? He smiled, a quiet, knowing smile. Because you're here, and you need help. That's reason enough. Everyone deserves someone to care about them, even if it's just a little. His words, simple as they were, struck Maria deeply. For the first time, she felt seen, not as a burden, not as a stranger, not as someone to ignore, but as a person worthy of care and kindness. Days turned into a week, and Maria began to feel more at home in the barn. She helped Jake with small chores around the ranch, learned to ride horses, and started to feel a sense of belonging she hadn't felt in years. Jake didn't rush her, didn't push her beyond what she was ready for. He simply offered steady support, a guiding presence and patience. Maria began to realize that the world wasn't entirely cruel, that there were still people who would help without expecting anything in return. One morning, as the light broke over the horizon, Maria was brushing one of the horses when Jake approached. He looked at her quietly, and then said something that made her heart skip a beat. You belong in my house. You don't have to sleep in the barn anymore. You don't have to be alone. Maria froze, unsure if she had heard correctly. The thought of leaving the barn, the place that had been her refuge, was strange. But the idea of having a safe home, food, and companionship filled her with a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. She looked at Jake, searching his eyes for any sign of jest or trickery, but all she saw was sincerity. Slowly, carefully, she nodded. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, Maria allowed herself to believe that life could be better, that someone could care for her and that she could accept it without shame. That night, she slept in the barn as usual, but her mind was filled with hope, a hope that perhaps tomorrow she would find a place she could truly call home. The days that followed were different for Maria. The barn, which had once been a lonely refuge, now felt like a place where hope could grow. She continued to care for the horses, sweeping the hay, feeding them, and learning their personalities. She discovered that each horse had a different way of showing affection. One would nuzzle her hand gently, another would whinny softly when she approached, and a small mare would follow her from stall to stall, as if she had always belonged at Maria's side. The routines brought comfort, and Maria realized that even small tasks could give her purpose and pride. Jake continued to visit daily, sometimes in the mornings before the work on the ranch began, sometimes in the evenings when the sun was low and the air was soft. Each visit was simple at first, a bucket of water for the horses, a loaf of bread, or a few carrots, but slowly they became moments of conversation. Maria told him about her childhood, about the small town she had grown up in, and the quiet library where she had spent countless hours reading. She spoke about her family, carefully choosing her words, avoiding the harsh memories that made her heart ache. Jake listened with patience, never interrupting, never judging. He offered gentle advice only when she asked, letting her set the pace for sharing. Maria began to notice small changes in herself. The fear that had gripped her every day began to loosen, replaced by a cautious curiosity about the world around her. She started exploring the ranch beyond the barn, walking along the fences, watching the cows graze and studying the wide fields stretching into the distance. She marveled at the beauty of the land, the way the morning mist hovered over the pastures, how the sunlight glinted off the dew on the grass, and how the wind carried the faint scent of wildflowers. For the first time in months, Maria felt alive, noticing things she had long ignored in the struggle to survive. One afternoon, while Maria was gathering eggs from the chicken coop, Jake approached with a small smile. "I've been thinking," he said quietly. "You've done a lot in a short time. You've learned quickly, and the horses seem to like you. How would you feel about staying somewhere a little more comfortable?" Maria paused, unsure what he meant. She had grown accustomed to the barn, the hay, the simple life, and the quiet companionship of the animals. The thought of leaving it felt strange, almost wrong. Jake noticed her hesitation and added, "I don't mean to rush you. I just want you to know there's more than this barn if you want it. You don't have to struggle alone anymore." Maria looked down at her hands, thinking of all the nights she had spent cold and hungry, all the mornings she had woken alone with nothing but hope to guide her. She realized that Jake wasn't asking her to leave her comfort behind. He was offering her a chance at something better, a home, safety, and someone to share her days with. That evening, after the chores were done and the sun had dipped below the horizon, Maria and Jake sat outside the barn, the horses resting quietly nearby. The air was cool and still, and for a moment, neither spoke. Maria felt the weight of everything she had endured pressing gently on her chest, and she realized that the past weeks of survival had brought her to this very moment. Jake broke the silence, his voice gentle. "You don't have to decide now," he said. "But think about it. There's a place inside the house for you if you want it. A bed, a warm meal, and someone who cares. You've earned that more than anyone I know." Maria swallowed hard, her emotions a mix of fear, relief, and hope. She had never been offered such kindness without expectation or judgment. People had often helped her before, but there was always a cost, words of pity, demands for repayment, or harsh criticism. Jake's offer felt different. It was simple, genuine, and free of condition. For the first time in her life, she felt the possibility of belonging. She allowed herself to imagine what it might be like. Waking up in a warm room, not worrying about the cold floor, sharing meals with someone who truly cared. The next morning, Maria awoke early, as she had for weeks, but this time her thoughts were different. She was not just thinking about survival. She was thinking about life, her life, and the choices she could make. She helped Jake with the morning chores, but her heart was lighter, her steps more confident. She began to notice the small joys in her routine. The way the sunlight glimmered through the barn windows, the soft nickers of the horses greeting her, the fresh smell of hay and earth. Life had not changed overnight, but the possibility of change filled her with energy and determination. As the days passed, Maria and Jake grew closer. He showed her the ranch beyond the barn, introducing her to the cows, the fences, the fields that stretched as far as the eye could see. He taught her to ride horses, guiding her hands gently on the reins, reminding her to trust her instincts and the animals. Maria discovered a sense of strength she hadn't known she possessed. Riding through the fields, feeling the wind on her face and the steady rhythm of the horse beneath her, she felt free. The world seemed larger and kinder than she had imagined. One late afternoon, Jake and Maria were walking along the edge of a pasture, watching the sunset paint the sky with deep orange and pink hues. Jake stopped and turned to her. "You've done so much already," he said, "and I want you to know, I mean what I said before. You belong in my house. Not because I think you owe me anything, not because I want to change you, but because you deserve a place where you can rest and be safe. You don't have to sleep in the barn anymore." Maria's heart raced. She had dreamed of warmth, of safety, of someone seeing her as worthy, but hearing it aloud made it real in a way she hadn't expected. She looked down at her hands, trembling slightly, unsure if she could believe it.
I don't know what to say," she whispered. I've never
had someone offer me something like that before." Jake reached out gently, resting his hand near hers without touching. "Then just take your time," he said. "You don't have to decide today. But I want you to know it's there when you're ready." That night, Maria lay in the barn, listening to the quiet sounds of the horses breathing softly. Her mind replayed Jake's words over and over. She thought about the safety of the barn, the simple comfort it had provided, and the warmth of hope that now burned in her heart. She realized that she was ready for more, that she was ready to trust someone, to accept kindness without guilt or fear. The barn had been her refuge, but it no longer needed to be her only home. The next morning, she rose with determination. She greeted the horses, fed them, and prepared for the day with a new sense of purpose. Jake arrived as usual, bringing a small breakfast and a gentle smile. Maria looked at him, her heart full of gratitude and courage. I think I'm ready," she said softly. Jake's eyes lit up and a small smile spread across his face. "Then let's go," he said, guiding her gently toward the house. The barn behind them was no longer a place of loneliness, but a symbol of her resilience and the journey she had undertaken to reach this moment. Inside the house, Maria saw a warmth and comfort she had almost forgotten. The rooms were simple, but filled with light and life. There were blankets on the beds, a small kitchen with the smell of fresh bread, and a sense of calm that filled the air. Jake showed her where she could keep her few belongings, and for the first time in a long time, Maria felt a sense of belonging. She realized that safety and kindness were not just dreams. They were real, and she could live within them. As the evening settled in, Maria sat by the fireplace, watching the flames dance and listening to the quiet of the house. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the long nights on the road, the hunger, the cold, the loneliness. And she thought about the barn, the horses, and the quiet kindness of Jake, who had offered her more than shelter. He had offered her hope, trust, and a chance to rebuild her life. She allowed herself to dream of the future, not just survival, but happiness, growth, and the possibility of love and friendship she had never dared to imagine before. For Maria, the barn had been the beginning of a story that was far from over. The days ahead promised new challenges and opportunities, but she faced them with courage, trust, and a sense of belonging that she had never felt before. And as she drifted to sleep that night, surrounded by warmth and light, she realized something profound. Sometimes, life's greatest kindness comes when you least expect it, and sometimes, the people who offer it become the reason you believe in hope again. Maria woke that morning to the soft light streaming through the window. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, she didn't feel the cold biting through her clothes or the ache of hunger pressing in her stomach. She felt warm, safe, and, most importantly, she felt at home. The barn had been her refuge, but the house was her new beginning. Every corner of the room she now called hers carried a sense of possibility she had not dared to imagine before. For the first time in a long time, Maria allowed herself to breathe without fear. After breakfast, Jake showed her around the house, pointing out small chores and responsibilities that would help her feel part of the home. "This is your room," he said with a smile. "You can keep your things here, make it comfortable, and spend as much time as you want." Maria ran her hand over the simple wooden furniture, feeling its smooth surface beneath her fingers. She realized that this place wasn't just about shelter, it was about stability. She could finally unpack, even if it was only a few items, and feel that she belonged somewhere. The days that followed were filled with routines that Maria had never experienced before. She helped Jake in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, washing dishes, and learning to prepare meals. At first, she was clumsy, spilling water or dropping utensils, but Jake laughed kindly, never making her feel ashamed. Slowly, she began to enjoy these small tasks, discovering satisfaction in contributing to the household. She learned that caring for a home and the people in it was another form of freedom. Freedom from fear, from loneliness, from the endless struggle to survive. The horses continued to be an important part of Maria's life. She rode them every morning, feeling the wind against her face and the steady rhythm of their hooves beneath her. Riding brought a sense of peace she had never known before, a connection with nature and the animals that was deeper than words could describe. Jake often accompanied her, guiding her through the pastures, teaching her tricks and techniques to ride better and handle the horses safely. Maria found herself laughing more than she had in months, the sound echoing across the fields and mingling with the soft neighs of the horses. Evenings were quiet and comforting. Maria and Jake would sit on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange, pink, and purple. They didn't need to fill the silence with words. The peace of the moment was enough. Maria often thought about the barn where she had slept, the place that had been her only refuge. It had been a place of survival, but it was also the place where she had first met Jake, where she had first felt kindness and trust. That barn, she realized, had led her here. It had prepared her for this new life. Over time, Maria's confidence grew. She began taking on more responsibilities around the ranch, helping with the fences, tending to the garden, and assisting Jake with the cows. She discovered that she was stronger than she had believed, capable of hard work and careful attention. The physical labor was demanding, but it also brought a sense of accomplishment that she had never known. Each task completed gave her pride and reinforced the feeling that she was finally part of something larger than herself. One afternoon, while Maria was tending to the horses, a neighbor from a nearby farm stopped by. He greeted Jake warmly and noticed Maria brushing one of the horses. "That girl is doing a fine job," he said. Jake smiled. "She's learning fast," he replied. Maria felt a warm glow of pride. She realized that she was not just surviving, she was contributing, and others were noticing her efforts. She had moved from being invisible, someone the world ignored, to someone who mattered. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental to her. Evenings became a time of reflection for Maria. She often sat by the fireplace in the house, sipping warm tea and thinking about how much her life had changed. The fear and loneliness that had once consumed her seemed distant now, like shadows of a past she had survived. She realized that safety and kindness were not just fleeting dreams. They could be real, and she had found them in the most unexpected way. Jake's steady presence and the simple life of the ranch had given her something she hadn't thought possible: a sense of belonging. One night, as they sat together after dinner, Maria turned to Jake and spoke quietly. "I never thought I would have a place like this," she said. "I never thought someone would see me and care, just because I exist." Jake looked at her, his eyes gentle. "You deserve it," he said simply. "Everyone deserves a place where they can be safe, where they can grow, where they can be happy. I'm glad you're here, Maria." Those words settled into her heart, and she felt tears welling up, not of sadness, but of gratitude. She had been given a chance at life, and she intended to make the most of it. The weeks turned into months, and Maria's life on the ranch continued to blossom. She became skilled at riding, caring for the horses, and managing small tasks around the house. The barn where she had once slept became a place of comfort for the animals, no longer a symbol of fear or loneliness. Maria looked at it with a sense of gratitude, understanding that it had been her stepping stone to a new life. The hardships she had endured had shaped her, but they no longer defined her. She was no longer a wanderer with nowhere to go. She was part of a home, part of a community, and part of a life filled with hope. Jake and Maria grew closer over time. Their bond was built on trust, shared experiences, and quiet understanding. He never pressured her, never demanded anything from her, and always gave her the space to grow at her own pace. Maria realized that trust and kindness were not weaknesses. They were strengths that could transform lives. She began to feel comfortable expressing herself, sharing her thoughts, dreams, and even fears with him. And in return, Jake shared his life, his routines, and his quiet wisdom, creating a partnership built on respect and care. One sunny morning, Maria stood at the edge of the pasture, watching the horses run freely. She felt the warmth of the sun on her face, the soft breeze in her hair, and a sense of peace she had never known. For years, her life had been defined by uncertainty, fear, and survival. But now, she had stability, love, and the freedom to dream. She realized that home was not just a building. It was the people, animals, and moments that made life meaningful. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for Jake, the ranch, and even the barn where her journey had begun. As the days passed, Maria continued to grow. She learned to cook meals for herself and Jake, to mend fences and clothing, and to care for the land. She discovered that life could be simple yet fulfilling, filled with beauty in small moments. A horse's gentle nuzzle, the scent of fresh bread, the glow of the sunset. Each day brought new lessons, new experiences, and new joys. And with each day, Maria's confidence and happiness grew stronger. The barn, once a place of hardship and loneliness, had become a symbol of her resilience. The horses, once companions in her solitude, had become friends, teachers, and sources of comfort. And Jake, who had entered her life quietly and without expectation, had become a guide, a supporter, and a steady presence she could rely on. Maria realized that life had a way of rewarding those who persevered, and that even in the darkest moments, hope could survive. As she lay in her warm bed that night, Maria reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She thought of the cold nights sleeping in the barn, the hunger that had pressed on her body, and the fear that had followed her every step. And she thought of Jake, the kindness he had shown, and the opportunity he had offered her to belong, to grow, and to live. She realized that she had not only survived, she had thrived. She had turned fear into courage, loneliness into connection, and despair into hope. Maria smiled softly to herself, knowing that her story was far from over, but that it had taken a beautiful turn. She had found a home, a friend, and a place where she could be herself without fear. The barn, the horses, and Jake had given her more than safety. They had given her life, renewed and full of possibility. And as she drifted into sleep, surrounded by warmth and love, Maria knew that she had finally found her place in the world, a place she could call home with pride and gratitude. The morning came again, bright and golden, and Maria rose with energy and purpose. She fed the horses, tended to the garden, and helped Jake with the ranch chores. She laughed more freely now, her heart light, her mind full of plans and dreams. Each day was a gift, a chance to live fully, and she embraced it with all the strength she had learned along the way. Maria had learned that life was not just about surviving, it was about finding joy, connection, and hope in the moments that truly mattered. And so, life continued on the ranch, steady and fulfilling. Maria's days were filled with work, learning, laughter, and companionship. She had gone from a lonely traveler sleeping in a barn to a young woman with a home, purpose, and a heart full of hope. The barn, once a place of fear and solitude, now stood as a reminder of her journey and her strength. And in the quiet evenings, when the sun painted the sky in warm hues and the horses grazed peacefully, Maria knew, deep in her heart, that she had finally found where she belonged.